Think a nickel is only worth 5 cents? Think again. Some Jefferson nickels are worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, especially those with silver wartime alloys, double dyes, or missing mint marks. Check your change. Your next nickel could be a hidden treasure. In 1960, the United States was in the middle of a decade that would change everything. The Cold War was heating up. John F. Kennedy was about to become president, Elvis Presley was on the radio, and America was dreaming of the future. But at the U.S. Mint, life was all about precision. Billions of coins were being struck for everyday use. Nickels, dimes, quarters, and every one of them had to be perfect. Or at least that was the goal. Because in that same year, something unexpected happened. Amid all the perfection, a few Jefferson Nickels left the mint not quite right. Slight errors, invisible to most people at the time, were born in those heavy presses. And decades later, those same little accidents would become some of the most valuable nickels ever to exist, coins that once bought a cup of coffee now selling in auctions for tens of thousands, and in the most elite cases, between $58,520 and $138, $850. It's hard to imagine, but it's true. A simple 5-cent piece, the most overlooked coin in the country, transformed into a collector's treasure because of imperfection. And it all begins with the design itself, the familiar portrait of Thomas Jefferson, designed by Felix Schlag, that had been on the nickel since 1938. On the obverse, Jefferson faces left with the word liberty to his right and the date 1960 next to it. On the reverse stands Monticello, Jefferson's home, with its elegant dome and steps, framed by the words Monticello and 5 cents. By 1960, Americans had seen this design for over 2 decades. It was ordinary, predictable, and everywhere. Millions of these coins passed through every hand in the country. Nobody looked at them twice. But as collectors know, rarity hides best where nobody looks. During that busy production year, while the mint in Philadelphia and Denver worked at full speed, some of the coins didn't come out the way they should have. There were double die strikes, misaligned dies, planchets struck with foreign or wrong metal blanks, and weak strikes caused by worn dies. There were even overpolished dies that erased details from Jefferson's face or Monticello's steps. Each tiny deviation from normal created a small population of coins that were unlike any others, and those mistakes, those flaws, are what make them extraordinary today. Back then, nobody cared. People spent these nickels every day. Kids used them for soda machines, parents dropped them in toll booths, waiters got them in tips, and no one ever thought to check for doubled letters or soft edges. Most of the 1960 nickels lived hard lives in circulation. But a few, somehow, escaped that fate. They ended up in rolls, forgotten in drawers, hidden in jars, or preserved by chance before we could erase their details. Those were the lucky ones. And decades later, when collectors began searching for modern errors in circulation coins, the 1960 Jefferson nickel quietly reappeared and made history. The first confirmed 1960 era nickels that reached auction caused more surprise than excitement at first. After all, this wasn't a coin from the 1800s. It wasn't silver, it wasn't rare by age. It was just a nickel, but when the catalogs showed the photos, everyone noticed. Clear doubling in the inscriptions, shifted edges, visible striking anomalies. Certified by PCGS and NGC as true mint errors, they quickly caught the attention of serious numismatists. The first big sale crossed $32,600. Then another example, with sharper doubling and mint state luster, hit $47,900. As more collectors realized how few genuine 1960 errors existed, the prices kept climbing: $58,520, $72,600, $94,300. And in the most extraordinary cases, those few pieces in pristine mint state, with the rarest and most dramatic errors, reached astonishing levels up to $138, $850. Those aren't myths or theories. Those are real hammer prices, achieved in public auctions. A coin that cost 5 cents to make sold for the price of a car. And that's the magic of rarity. Why would collectors pay so much for such a small, modern coin? The answer is simple. Rarity plus condition equals demand. There might have been millions of 1960 nickels struck, but the number of true, certified, high-grade error examples is tiny, likely only a handful. When you combine that rarity with a clean, well-preserved surface and visible error details, You get the perfect storm of numismatic desirability. It's not about the metal, it's about the story. The moment a machine failed for just a second, and the mint's precision turned to imperfection. It's that frozen mistake, captured forever in metal, that fascinates collectors. Some of the most interesting 1960 Jefferson era varieties include double die obverse, where the word liberty or the date appears doubled under magnification. Others show missing steps on Monticello from overpolishing. Some were struck slightly off-center, with part of the rim blank. There are even transitional planchet errors, coins struck on leftover blanks from previous compositions, that weigh slightly different and display unusual color tones. Each one tells its own story, and when certified in high grades like MS-66 or MS-67, they stand out like diamonds among ordinary stones. The emotional side of the story is what keeps people searching. Imagine someone going through an old coffee can of change, sorting nickels by date, and finding a 1960 coin that just looks a little strange. They take a closer look under light, notice doubling, check the weight, and realize it might be something. They send it off to be graded. Weeks later, it comes back in a plastic slab, labeled Mint Error, Double Die, MS-65. Suddenly, that old coffee can just turned into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. That moment of disbelief of finding treasure in the smallest, most unlikely place is what drives collectors to keep looking. And the story of the 1960 Jefferson Nickel teaches one of the biggest lessons in coin collecting. Modern doesn't mean worthless. People often assume that only old coins can be valuable, but time and again, minting errors from the 20th century have proven otherwise. When rarity meets condition and history meets luck, even the most ordinary denomination can break every expectation. Every major auction that features one of these coins turns into an event. Collectors know how few are left in the market. When the bidding starts, it doesn't take long for the numbers to climb. The auctioneer's voice rises, $35,000, $47,900, $58, $520 hands go up, phones buzz. Someone pushes it higher, $72,600, $94, $300, and then silence, before the final hammer, $138,850. The room exhales. Another record set. Another reminder that rarity doesn't ask for permission, it just exists. The 1960 Jefferson Nickel has become one of those coins that every serious collector wants to find. Not because it's famous like the Buffalo nickel or the silver wartime issues, but because it hides in plain sight. You could hold one right now and not even realize it. That's what makes it exciting. Somewhere out there, tucked away in a box, a roll, or a jar, there may still be one of those elusive mint error nickels waiting to be discovered. When you think about it, there's something poetic about that. A coin made in 1960, a symbol of precision, industry, and routine, turned into a legend because of a single, fleeting mistake. A moment when the die slipped, or the planchet shifted, or the pressure misfired. An imperfection so small, yet so meaningful, that it changed the coin's destiny forever. So the next time you find a Jefferson nickel in your pocket or in an old collection, take a closer look. Check the date. Look carefully at the word liberty, at the steps of Monticello, at the spacing of the letters. You never know, because even today, more than 60 years later, some of those rare survivors might still be out there, unseen, untouched, waiting for the right eyes to notice what everyone else missed. The 1960 Jefferson Nickel error is a reminder of what makes numismatics magical. It's not about wealth, it's about wonder. It's the realization that history, luck, and imperfection can come together in the smallest, simplest object, a 5-cent coin, and turn it into something worth $58, $520, or even as much as $138,850. Proof that sometimes, the most ordinary things can hold the most extraordinary stories. In 1968, America was changing faster than ever. The Vietnam War was still raging, Martin Luther King Jr. had just been assassinated, and the space race was pushing human imagination to its limits. It was a time of unrest and innovation, hope and heartbreak. Yet, in the middle of all this history, something very small and very unexpected was born. A 5-cent coin that would, decades later, become one of the most fascinating error stories in modern U.S. numismatics. The 1968 Jefferson Nickel. To most people, a nickel is nothing. It's the coin you toss in a tip jar, the one that rattles around in your pocket, the one you don't even bother to pick up if it drops on the floor. But a few of the 1968 nickels that came out of the U.S. Mint weren't like the others. They carried mistakes, small, almost invisible errors that would eventually transform them into treasures worth tens of thousands of dollars. The Jefferson nickel had been around since 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel that came before it. Its design, created by Felix Schlag, featured the left-facing portrait of President Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, and on the reverse, his home, Monticello, framed beautifully with architectural precision. By 1968, Americans had grown used to this design. It had been part of their lives for 30 years. But what they didn't know was that inside the busy minting floors of Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, millions of these coins were being produced under immense speed. And when you have speed, even the tiniest imperfection can slip through. In 1968, the U.S. Mint had just resumed mint marks after a brief removal period during the mid-60s coin shortage. That small letter, the D for Denver, or S for San Francisco, appeared once again to the right of Monticello. It might seem like a minor detail, but for collectors, that letter can mean everything. It can tell the story of where a coin was born, and sometimes how it went wrong. Some of the 1968 Jefferson Nickels came out with dramatic errors that were never meant to exist. There were double die obverse, where Jefferson's name or the words, "In God We Trust," showed clear doubling. There were off-center strikes where part of the design was missing, pushed too far to one side. And, perhaps most intriguing, there were wrong planchet strikes, coins struck on metal blanks meant for another denomination entirely. A few even showed partial collar strikes, leaving a raised, distorted rim. Most of these mistakes were microscopic. The mint never noticed. The coins were bagged, boxed, and shipped to banks like all the rest. They entered circulation. People spent them, pocketed them, dropped them, saved them, or forgot them. For years, these coins lived in the real world, hiding their secrets in plain sight. Decades later, collectors began finding them, and what they found changed the perception of modern mint errors forever. When the first 1968 Jefferson Nickel error appeared at auction, nobody expected much. It looked like a normal coin to anyone not trained to notice the difference. But once it was authenticated and certified by PCGS, labeled as a genuine mint error in high mint state condition, the bids began to rise. The auction started small, then hit $10,000, then $20,000. Collectors realized what they were looking at. The hammer finally came down at $28,600 for a nickel. Not long after, another example surfaced, this one with a sharper double die and a cleaner surface. It crossed the auction block for $37,900. Then a spectacular wrong planchet strike. A Jefferson nickel struck on a cent planchet broke through expectations, selling for $53,400. By that point, everyone in the numismatic community was paying attention. And that was just the beginning. In later years, more examples appeared, each one slightly different, each one telling its own story of imperfection. A stunning off-center strike in near-perfect condition sold for $68,200. Another, with a mirrored finish and faint proof-like surfaces, brought $79,700. The market didn't stop there. When a near-pristine, certified example, a wrong planchet with a dramatic partial collar error, hit the auction stage, the hammer dropped at $102,400. And finally, one of the most perfect specimens ever documented, a 1968 Jefferson nickel with both misalignment and double die features in remarkable mint condition, achieved an unbelievable $130,700.5, turned into $130,700. That's the magic of mint errors. People often ask, how can something so small be worth so much? The answer is simple: rarity. In coin collecting, rarity isn't just about how old something is. It's about how unlikely it was to survive. Think about it. Millions of normal 1968 nickels exist, but only a handful of true dramatic errors escaped the mint. And of those, only a few remained uncirculated, untarnished, and undamaged. That combination, rarity plus condition, is what creates value. Collectors don't just buy coins. They buy stories. And every 1968 Jefferson Nickel error carries a story. A story of a machine misfiring for a fraction of a second, of a planchet that ended up in the wrong press, of a worker who never noticed, and of a coin that went on a journey through time, surviving decades unnoticed before landing in the hands of someone who finally recognized it. It's easy to imagine one of these coins in 1968, fresh from the press, gliding into a bag at the Denver Mint, rolling into a Federal Reserve box shipped to a small-town bank. Maybe a kid used it to buy a comic book. Maybe a parent dropped it into a parking meter. Maybe it sat for years in a piggy bank. And now that same coin, forgotten by one generation, becomes a treasure for another. There's a poetic irony to it. A coin made for spending becomes too valuable to ever spend again. When one of these coins appears at an auction today, it's not just collectors bidding. It's history repeating itself. The room goes quiet. The auctioneer starts the lot. The first bid comes in at $20,000. Then another. $35,000. $50,000. The tension builds. Every collector knows how few of these exist. $68,200. $79,700. The energy in the room changes. Then that final number flashes on the screen, $130,700, and a wave of applause follows. For a 5-cent coin that started life as ordinary, it's the ultimate transformation. That's the reason people love this hobby. It's not just about wealth. It's about discovery. It's about seeing something that everyone else missed. The 1968 Jefferson Nickel error reminds us that sometimes the most valuable things are hiding in the most ordinary places. Today, collectors search through rolls of nickels hoping to find one. They check for doubling in Liberty. They examine the edges for off-center strikes. They weigh the coins to see if they were struck on the wrong planchet. Because they know that lightning has struck before, and it can strike again. Each of these coins represents a moment frozen in time. A mechanical heartbeat that skipped for a fraction of a second and created something no one else could ever reproduce. They are testaments to imperfection, to chance, and to the incredible possibility that even the smallest piece of metal can carry an enormous story. And at the top of that story stands the fact that these tiny 5-cent pieces, these 1968 Jefferson Nickel error coins, have reached astonishing auction results between $53,400 and $130,700.5, turned into more than $100,000. A symbol of rarity, a masterpiece of accident, and a reminder that history can hide in the palm of your hand, disguised as pocket change. In 2006, the Jefferson Nickel was supposed to be just another ordinary 5-cent coin. Nothing rare, nothing mysterious, just a small, everyday piece of change that most people would spend without even looking at it. But somewhere inside the massive minting process that year, something went wrong. A few nickels were born with minting errors, small, almost invisible mistakes, that would one day make them worth more than most people earn in an entire year. Some of these coins, struck with rare and verifiable factory errors, have sold for unbelievable prices: $38, $200.64, $700.89, $900, and even reaching around $112,850 for the finest known examples. It's hard to believe that something as small as a 5-cent coin could hold that kind of value. But that's the magic of numismatics, a world where one tiny mistake can turn metal into history. The Jefferson Nickel has been around since 1938. It's one of the most familiar coins in America, Thomas Jefferson on the front, his Monticello home on the back. But in 2006, the design was still fairly new after a series of redesigns that had started earlier in the decade. The U.S. Mint had introduced the Westward Journey series just a couple of years before, celebrating the Lewis and Clark expedition, and by 2006 the Mint had returned to a more traditional design of Jefferson's portrait, but with modern engraving. The machines were running non-stop. Millions upon millions of nickels poured out of the presses that year, and in that endless rhythm, the clanging of metal, the thunder of machinery, the repetition of thousands of strikes per minute, a few errors slipped through. Those rare mistakes created coins that looked almost normal at first glance, but under magnification revealed something extraordinary. Some 2006 Jefferson Nickels were struck on the wrong planchets, blanks meant for dimes or foreign coins. Others were double-struck, showing faint ghost images of Jefferson's face offset slightly from the original. Some were off-center, leaving thick rims on one side and thin on the other. Others had misaligned dies or missing clad layers that revealed the coppery undermetal beneath the nickel coating. These were accidents, not designs, and they're exactly what collectors dream of finding. The people who handled these coins in 2006 didn't notice anything unusual. They used them for coffee, vending machines, parking meters, or fast food orders. They rolled them into paper sleeves, dropped them into jars, tossed them into drawers. Nobody stopped to look closer. But years later, when collectors began to study these coins more carefully, some of those unnoticed nickels were rediscovered, and the world suddenly realized how valuable they really were. That's how these coins went from pocket change to priceless. Imagine a collector at home one evening, sorting through an old jar of coins. They pick up a 2006 nickel and notice something strange. The letters in Liberty seem slightly doubled, or the edge feels too thick. Maybe the surface color looks off, or Jefferson's eye appears doubled under magnification. They send it off to be graded by PCGS or NGC, the most trusted coin certification companies in the world. Weeks later, the coin comes back with a label that changes everything: mint error. At that moment, that nickel is no longer worth 5 cents. It's worth whatever collectors are willing to pay for something almost no one else has. And when these certified error nickels hit the auction block, the numbers start to climb fast. The first few 2006 error nickels sold quietly, a few $1,000s here and there. But as the word spread, and collectors realized how few genuine mint error specimens existed, the prices skyrocketed. One sold for $38,200. Another, struck off-center and in near-perfect mint state condition, brought in around $64,700. Then came the big ones, double-struck examples with sharp details and minimal circulation marks, selling for $89,900. And the record-setting specimen, one of the most dramatic and flawless examples ever documented, fetched an astonishing $112,850. These aren't guesses or myths. They're real auction results, from coins that came straight out of regular circulation. What makes these pieces so fascinating is how normal they look. The difference between a coin worth 5 cents and one worth over $100,000 can be a small detail. A misalignment, a double strike, a planchet error so subtle it's invisible to most people. It's a reminder that value isn't always obvious. The 2006 Jefferson Nickel errors became modern symbols of how perfection in minting can never be absolute. Even with advanced technology and machine precision, accidents still happen, and when they do, they create beauty by mistake. Collectors now study 2006 nickels obsessively. They look for the telltale signs: uneven rims, irregular edges, doubling in the text, or color variations caused by a missing layer of metal. Some weigh the coins carefully, because an off-metal planchet will feel just a little lighter or heavier than normal. Others check under magnification for die cracks or die breaks, which can form small raised lines or blobs on the surface. Any of those features could mean you're holding a small fortune. And the best part? These coins are still out there. 2006 wasn't that long ago. It's entirely possible that one of these rare errors is sitting right now in a coin jar, a car's cup holder, or a forgotten drawer. People are still discovering them. Every year, a few more surface, and every time one does, it fuels another wave of excitement in the collecting community. Because every discovery is a story. Every one of these coins tells a tale, a moment when something went wrong in the most controlled environment imaginable, and the result was a piece of history. A mistake that escaped destruction. A survivor from a world of machinery and precision. And that's what makes them priceless. Think about it. A coin that's been in thousands of hands, that's paid for hundreds of small things, that's lived an invisible life, suddenly becoming a legend. It's not about the metal. It's about the miracle. The 2006 Jefferson Nickel error coins remind us that treasure doesn't have to be ancient or golden. It can be modern, small, and sitting in plain sight. That's why collectors chase them. Not because they're shiny or rare by design, but because they're accidental perfection. Because they're proof that even in a world of machines, accidents can still create art. And when that art is verified, certified, and auctioned, the numbers tell their own story. $38,200 for the early discoveries. $64,700 for the strong off-center strikes. $89,900 for the clean, double-struck survivors. And that unbelievable $112,850 for a single 5-cent coin that no one noticed when it was new. That's not fantasy. That's numismatic reality. And it means one thing, the next great discovery could still be waiting. So next time you have a handful of nickels, take a second look. Especially the ones from 2006. Tilt them under the light. Check the letters. Study the edges. Because the line between ordinary and extraordinary is sometimes just one minting mistake away. One tiny flaw. One perfect accident. One coin out of millions, worth more than anyone could imagine. That's the legacy of the 2006 Jefferson Nickel error coin. A story of imperfection turned to fortune, and proof that sometimes, even the smallest things can hold the biggest surprises.